Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we are going to talk about reading more, or how to read more books, or even how to get started in reading, or maybe you're in a reading slump. I feel like these are the things that have really helped me out, and I think at this point I've been reading for quite a while, and I've been quite consistent with it throughout the years. So I thought I would share some of my tips, especially ones that I haven't seen really talked about online. And I've split this up into a couple of different sections that should be helpful depending on where you are with reading. So yeah, let's just get started. First of all, what's really important is actually the selection. If you're struggling to read or just want to get back into reading, I definitely think you need to pick up a high plot book. And this usually is not like literary fiction. It can be, of course, but I think that generally a thriller is really good for this, or even fantasy that maybe doesn't have so much world building. But for instance, Frida McFadden, I mean, there's a lot of controversy about her books, but at the same time, they're super fast paced. The language is very simple. And so it's easy to get back into reading if you need something to kind of motivate you. They're very high plot. I also really love Riley Sager for this. He kind of gets you back into that kind of mood of fast-paced, short chapters. And I think that these kinds of books are really helpful if you just need that kind of extra motivation. The next thing I would suggest is actually to go to the library or the bookstore, wherever you want to buy a new book, and sit there and read the first chapter. And I think this is helpful for a couple of reasons. First of all, you'll see if you mesh with the writing and see if it's a book that you would want to pick up. But also because you're kind of in the mood and there's lots of people there, maybe other people reading, maybe there's like a cafe in your bookstore, this can really help you get started with the book. So you're not leaving the bookstore with just like a new book on your TBR. You actually have started the book, you understand a bit of the plot, and that is very motivating for you to finish the rest of the book. For me, this really helps out. A lot of times I'll just go to the bookstore, pick up a book, read it for a little bit, and then I can make a decision whether or not I want to keep reading. And then if I do, then I will bring it home, and I've already started. So there you go, you're already one step ahead. Next up, you want to actually prepare where you are going to read your book. And I suggest having like a mixed media kind of situation going. So I think it's really great to download an EPUB onto your phone. This you can do quite easily, especially with an iPhone, and I'm sure also with Android. But basically, if you have an EPUB, you can just send it to yourself by email, and then you just open it in Books, and there you go. You can read it from your phone. And this is helpful because it allows you to basically read from anywhere. You don't have to carry a big book, and you also don't have to get out a secondary device like a Kindle. But I do recommend having like a second way of reading. So I would suggest, either doing an audiobook or also having the hard copy, maybe from the library, so you don't have to pay for two copies. And then also the Kindle is really helpful. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. But I think it's nice to have like maybe two of those ways going at once, so that you have some options depending on how you're feeling. And then just a couple of quick tips for the Kindle. If you change the text size and also the layout, this can also help you read a little bit easier. For instance, some people find it's easier to read with actually smaller text because you can kind of see more at once. But for others, it's easier with larger text, and this is kind of obvious, but you can also change the margins. And a wider margin means that you're reading text more in the middle, so your eyes don't have to do so much work back and forth. And I think this is really helpful if you're kind of tired or you're like right before going to bed, because you're just not working as hard. You might not read as quickly, but it's just less strenuous on your eyes. Okay, now let's move on to the environment. I think it's really important that we stop this idea of having like a perfect reading environment. It seems kind of like ideal and perfect and sets you in the mood, which can be fun and it can be nice if that's something that works for you, but it doesn't work for everyone. And I think that it's important that you can just read and you don't feel like you have to do an entire setup before reading, because you have to get your tea made, and then you have to light a candle, and then get this blanket, and then and then there's a lot of like build up to it. And then if you're not going to sit there and read for a long time, it doesn't really make sense. I know that this can also be helpful for some people, but I think it's important to also understand that there's the other side of it where you don't need to have a big setup. And another example of this is actually trying to pair reading with something else. So for instance, if you're just waiting for your kettle to boil, or for when you're waiting for your pasta water, or you've got stuff in the oven, things that you're kind of waiting for, I think this is a good time to pick up the book, especially if you have it on your phone and just, you're waiting there and then you can read a couple pages. And then with the environment, we obviously have to talk about our phones. So I have a couple of tips on actually how to spend basically less time on your phone. But for the environment, I think that it's important to actually put away your phone. And that means like out of sight, because there are studies that show that if you even have it in your sight, you're thinking about your phone. So I'll just like tuck it away in the couch or tuck it away somewhere. And then that helps you kind of forget about it. And I'll talk about the rest of the phone tips later. Okay, so moving on to section 3, and this is the part about staying hooked. Once you've started the book, how to actually stay hooked and keep picking up that book over and over. So one thing that might be very controversial is actually to spoil the ending. I think that sometimes this is really helpful if you are really not sure where the book is going, and maybe that's why you aren't picking it up as often, because you don't really get what's going on, or maybe you get what's going on, but you're just not sure like what the point is. And I mean, at some point maybe you just put down the book, but sometimes it's nice to have a spoiler, and that is just enough motivation to get you through it. This is not for everyone, but I think for certain books this can be really helpful and to give you kind of a reason to keep going, and it can immerse you more inside of the plot because you have something to look forward to. Another thing that I think is important is, for instance, if you are doing something else or on your phone and you're really feeling like, oh, I want to pick up that book, but there's something kind of blocking you. What really helps for me, and this is I think maybe my favorite tip out of everything, is to actually try and think of what just happened in the book, what you had just read, like maybe the day before, maybe a week before. Okay, what actually happened? And give yourself some time to kind of reflect on what's going on in the book, what's happening with the plot, and then more importantly, what's at stake. Are the characters feeling pressured, and is there a time crunch, or do we need to help someone? And this is why it's really good to have a high plot book as well, because these two things go hand in hand. And yeah, usually that gets me right back into it, because I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot they just found out that this thing happened and they're gonna go and do this now. And I don't know, it's just exciting. You got to get yourself excited about the plot. And then I'll mention again, using mixed kind of media. If reading on your phone or the Kindle is not working for you, okay, maybe you should try the paperback. And this is why the library is so valuable. I definitely recommend, trying a different format, or even picking up the audiobook if you can. Okay, sorry to jump in here, but I also wanted to mention how valuable audiobooks are. Like, they have truly changed my life because you can listen to them at any point. And so if you're someone that goes for runs or walks or whatever, it's just really great to have an audiobook, and it can really help you kind of get through books. So I use BookBeat, which I think is by far the best service. And I have a link in case you want to try it, and you get like 30 days free. Yeah, I think it's really valuable, and it's like the best value for money, because you can pay like 10 euros and you get like 20 hours listening, which is already like 2 books. And then if you pay 15 euros, I believe you get 40 hours, which is like 4 books. And then if you do the 20 euros, then you get like 100 hours. So I think that this is the best deal, like far better than Audible. However, they don't have every single book, but they are definitely getting better with their selection. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of stop in and say that I think audiobooks are reading, and they're very valuable for people that are on the go. Okay, so the next section is actually going to be like the psychology section. So I want to talk about, first of all, the power of a DNF, so it did not finish. And this is something that I find super important, is that if you are reading a book and you're just truly not enjoying it, and you are just kind of forcing yourself to read it, this is probably just not the book for you at that moment. And I think that a lot of times we feel guilt with putting down a book, because not only have we spent probably money on the book, but also our time. We've invested our time, maybe you've made it through halfway through the book. And I think it's really important to not feel that guilt, and to actually focus on the fact that you've realized, oh, this is not for me. And that allows you to kind of move on to something that is for you. And you can kind of maybe pinpoint what was not working for you. Don't feel like it's a loss of time or loss of energy. I think that this is extremely valuable in reading, to figure out what you don't like. And then that will allow you to read books that you like even more, which will help you even read faster. So I think it's kind of a catch-22 in the sense that you feel like you've wasted time, so you want to finish it. But in general, putting down the book, and also you don't have to say you're putting it down forever, just for the meantime, it can be really helpful. And picking up something else, maybe in a different genre, I feel like that's extremely helpful for me to just accept that I'm just not going to finish some books, and that's just the way it goes. Also, if you're having trouble reading the book and you're just kind of like reading over and over and you kind of are losing what's going on, you might just be tired. And do not feel guilt if you want to take a rest. Like, that is completely fine. And not everybody has to be reading whenever they have a moment of free time. Like, you can take a rest. And I think it's important to just realize that, okay, reading is great, but it should not overshadow your body's needs. If you are noticing, oh, I can't really follow what's going on, then that's fine. Just take a rest. And I think that's really okay. Another thing that I want to talk about is actually being in a book community or a book club. I think that these are super motivating because not only are you kind of given a deadline, but also it allows you to have this social connection with people, and it really makes reading like a communal exercise. Yeah, you learn things about other people, and I think it's really great. And even if you don't go to the book club, you know, you could always just follow one and read those books and kind of see what kind of books other people are reading or are interested in. Next up, finally, is the phone tips that I have. So I think that it's also important, along the lines of guilt, is to allow yourself to have your phone time, to scroll and do whatever. I think that it's important to have kind of an idea of how long you've been doing that for, but I think that it's important to just allow yourself that time. Like, maybe you just want to sit for an hour, just scroll on your phone, read random things, do whatever you want, message friends and whatnot. And I think that sometimes we feel like we should be reading instead of being on our phone, and then that stresses us out, and then also makes us kind of like resent reading because it's something that is kind of creating this barrier, and that it's like this never-ending cycle of just feeling guilty, really. I think it's important to just take that time for yourself and do whatever you want, you know? And if that's just sitting on your phone, that's completely fine. However, if we feel like, okay, I've been on my phone for a while, I've relaxed, I took a little nap and whatever, and you're having this kind of trouble getting off the phone, I think that the first thing that's super helpful for me is to quit the short form. So I will allow myself to, for instance, only watch long form videos. And that forces me to get off those like shorts that just keep going and going and going. And I think that this is super helpful, because once you switch to long form, it kind of slows everything down a little bit and is not so stimulating. And I'll do this for however long I want, and then I'll let myself go back on YouTube Shorts or whatever it is. And it just kind of depends on what you're feeling. And if you feel like, okay, I've spent too much time now, this is one of the ways that can help to kind of shift that. Another thing that I do, which might sound weird, is I just start turning down the volume. So I will just be watching something, or if it's shorts or if it's long form, and I'll just like turn down the volume slowly to the point where there's no volume. And then I kind of realize, oh, this is what I'm watching. And sometimes it's something that I'm not even interested in. And it just kind of helps bring you back to reality. And I haven't seen anyone talk about doing this, so I don't know if that's just like a weird me thing, but the volume is so stimulating and it really gives you that dopamine. Whereas like sitting in silence or like in a very quiet zone is, I think, really helpful to kind of, bring you back to reality, get rid of that like super high energy dopamine of, the way that YouTubers talk and everything, and just bring you back, So I think that for some people that this might be helpful. Okay, so that is it for all of my tips on reading more. I hope that this was helpful, and that maybe these are some things you haven't heard of before, because there's a lot of like the same stuff going on, but I felt like I would share what has worked for me. And I think that it's great to be reading, but I also think that it's important to take time for ourselves in other ways that also bring us joy. Anyways, that is it for me. I hope that some of these tips kind of helped out, or maybe give you an idea of where to start and how to continuously be picking up books, and also when to let them go. So I feel like it's all about balance, just like everything. And I think that, reading should be something you do for yourself. And yeah, I've had a lot of great connections with people through reading. So regardless, thank you for your time. And yeah, let me know what you're reading within the next few weeks. Bye.